My husband and daughter had spent an entire month pretending I didn't exist, so I finally decided to leave. 5 years later, he called and asked if I'd come to our daughter's wedding. I agreed, unsure what kind of reception awaited me. When he saw me standing there that day, his hands began to tremble, and in that moment, I understood just how powerful it can be to walk away. "Dad, did you hear something?" Like, weird white noise. I froze mid-movement, the TV remote still extended in my hand. My 17-year-old daughter stared straight through me, not at me, her question directed entirely to her father. It wasn't curiosity, it was dismissal, like she was commenting on a strange hum coming from a faulty appliance. Cole didn't even bother to lift his eyes from his phone. "Just the house settling, honey," he murmured. The house settling. That's what I had become after 2 decades of marriage, not Jade, not mom, not even an irritation worth acknowledging. I had turned into background static, a faint hum blending into the creak of aging floorboards that no one notices anymore. Before we go further, thank you for being here and listening to stories about rediscovering strength in the most unbearable circumstances. If you believe no one deserves to be erased from their own life, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps these stories reach people who need them most. Now, let's see how it all unfolded. That was day 28 of what I'd come to call the eraser. 28 days in a row of being treated as though I were invisible in my own home. 28 mornings of cheerful greetings met with deliberate silence. 28 evenings of returning home to see them already eating takeout, never saving me a single portion. By that point, I'd started checking mirrors, pressing my palms against walls, just to make sure I could still interact with the physical world. At 2 in the morning, 3 nights ago, I'd actually searched online. Can you be dead and not know it? That alone should tell you everything about where my mind was. The remote rested on the coffee table between them, just 18 inches away. When I reached for it, Emma snatched it up, clutching it to her chest like I was trying to steal something sacred. "We're watching something," she said flatly, eyes still on the screen. "I just need 5 minutes," I replied, hating how small my voice sounded, thin, pleading, foreign to my own ears. 5 minutes, she repeated, eyes never leaving the reality show couple arguing on screen. We're at the good part. There was always a good part. Every time I wanted to use the television I'd helped pay for in the house I helped maintain, they were always in the middle of something I'd supposedly ruin. I stood there for another long moment before letting my hand fall to my side, a quiet surrender. Cole and Emma were already absorbed in their program again, bodies angled slightly toward each other, forming an invisible wall that kept me on the outside. I turned away and walked into the kitchen, my footsteps echoing off the hardwood floors I had scrubbed clean just the weekend before. Breakfast dishes still filled the sink, the same breakfast I hadn't been invited to because they'd gone out for pancakes without mentioning a word. I'd found the receipt on the counter at 8:30 that morning. 2 orders of blueberry pancakes, 2 orange juices, 2 coffees. Timestamp, 7:15. They had left early, intentionally avoiding me. It wasn't new behavior. The pattern had been growing quietly for weeks, each slight small enough to brush aside on its own, but together they built something undeniable. It began subtly, conversations that stopped the moment I entered a room, jokes I wasn't included in, plans made without even a nod in my direction. Then it deepened. My morning greetings vanished into silence. Cole would raise his newspaper like a shield whenever I spoke. Emma's eyes would glide past me as if I were transparent, even when I stood directly in front of her asking about her day. At first, I tried to explain it away. Maybe Cole was buried in work. Maybe Emma was just being a teenager, self-absorbed, detached, passing through a phase. But deep down, I knew it wasn't bonding, it was rejection. Intentional, coordinated rejection. I opened the refrigerator, looking for something to make for dinner, and found almost nothing. The groceries I'd bought 3 days earlier had vanished, replaced by takeout containers and ready-to-eat meals I hadn't purchased. They were eating without me, shopping without me, living without me. My phone buzzed on the counter, a message from my friend Marcus. "Still on for coffee tomorrow?" I stared at the screen, trying to remember when we'd set that up. Yesterday? Last week? Time had started to blur. Every day felt identical. Wake up, Try to be seen. Fail. Go to bed. Repeat. I typed back, yes, 10 o'clock at Riverside Cafe. Her reply was instant. Perfect. Can't wait to catch up. Haven't seen you in forever. Forever. Had it really been that long? I scrolled through our old messages. It had been 6 weeks since our last coffee date. 6 weeks since I'd gone anywhere except my part-time shifts at the university library. 6 weeks since I'd done anything that didn't revolve around trying to make my family acknowledge that I still existed. When had I turned into this version of myself, a lonely ghost haunting the outline of her former life? I closed the refrigerator and noticed something out of place on the counter, Cole's briefcase, sitting neatly by the back door, ready for the next morning. But tomorrow was Saturday. Cole never packed his briefcase on a Saturday for Monday. He was precise about his routines. He always packed Sunday night, never earlier. A chill crept up my spine. I walked closer, convincing myself I was just curious, not prying. The leather was polished, expensive, exactly like Cole, orderly, controlled, faultless. A folded paper stuck out from the side pocket, the corner stamped with official letterhead. My hand moved before I could stop it. Petition for dissolution of marriage. That's what the heading said, printed in cold, perfect typeface. The paper trembled in my grip, or maybe it was me trembling. My eyes darted over the words that shattered my reality in an instant. Irreconcilable differences, equitable distribution of assets, custody arrangements. Custody arrangements. For Emma, who was 17 and legally beyond the age for custody, the inclusion of that clause told me everything I needed to know. Cole wasn't trying to arrange guardianship. He was ensuring that even weekend visits, even phone calls, would be restricted. He wanted to make my erasure permanent, backed by law. I turned the page with trembling fingers. The next section detailed asset division, cold, meticulous, and brutally thorough. Our home, the place we'd chosen together, painted together, where I had planted every flower and replaced every squeaky hinge, was listed under marital property to be retained by petitioner. Cole would keep the house. Our joint accounts, savings, checking, investment, were divided neatly, my name reduced to a ledger entry. Even my modest retirement fund from the university library was accounted for, calculated, and catalogued. 20 years of shared effort reduced to paperwork, as if our marriage were nothing more than a dissolved business agreement. When I reached the final page, I saw Cole's signature already inked in his familiar, disciplined handwriting. Dated 3 days earlier, Thursday. The same day I'd suggested lunch at the sushi restaurant, when he'd walked right past me as if I were made of air. He had already made his decision then. Already filed away our life together. Already ended it in silence. That month of quiet cruelty hadn't been about stress, or teenage rebellion, or household tension. It had been an orchestrated withdrawal, a calculated campaign designed to make me crumble, to drive me out so he wouldn't have to be the villain. My eyes caught the yellow sticky note attached to the bottom of the page. 3 words written in Cole's unmistakable script. Sign here. Not I'm sorry. Not we need to talk. Not even I want a divorce. Just instructions, as if I were a subordinate being dismissed from a job. I stood there in my kitchen, surrounded by the space I had kept clean, in the home I had maintained beside the family I had given 2 decades to, and felt something inside me shift, not breaking, but solidifying. A quiet resolve. I wasn't going to sign those papers. Not that night. Not that way. I folded the document carefully and slid it back into Cole's briefcase exactly as I'd found it. Then I went upstairs to our bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out my old college duffel bag. Into it went 3 soft shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, a week's worth of socks and underwear, my toothbrush, my laptop, and the framed photo of baby Emma that sat on my nightstand. Not because I planned to keep it forever, but because I needed to remember the little girl who used to see me before she learned to look through me. On my pillow, I left a short note. Gone to think. Don't worry about me. I'm okay. That was all. I gave them nothing more. Then I walked down the stairs, past the living room where Cole and Emma were still watching television, neither one looking up as I passed. I opened the front door and stepped into the cool night air, closing it quietly behind me. They didn't notice. They wouldn't for hours, maybe not until morning, maybe not until they needed something from me. By then, I'd be gone. Not because they had one, but because I had finally understood. You cannot force people to see you. You can only choose to stop being invisible. I drove to the train station and bought a ticket north, to my hometown, to my parents' house. The next train left at 3:30 in the morning. I had 4 hours to wait. I didn't cry. I didn't call Cole. I didn't text Emma. I just sat on a cold metal bench under the humming fluorescent lights and, for the first time in 30 days, felt like I could breathe. The train reached Millbrook Station at 6:47 a.m., just as a pale sunrise bled through the gray clouds. During the 4-hour ride, I had stared out at the passing darkness, my reflection ghostly in the window, a hollow-eyed woman with a duffel bag, running from a life that had already run from her. My father's house was only 3 blocks from the station, the same 2-story colonial where I'd grown up. I walked slowly, each step heavier, the weight in my bag nothing compared to the weight of what it symbolized. 43 years old and moving back home like a dropout who'd failed adulthood. The porch light glowed, as it always had, my father's old habit, never turning it off until daylight fully broke. I stood on the front step for nearly a minute before pressing the doorbell, rehearsing explanations in my mind that all sounded equally pitiful. When the door finally opened, my father stood there in his worn blue terrycloth robe, the same one Mom had threatened to throw away for a decade. His hair was sticking out wildly, and his glasses sat crooked on his face. "Jade." His voice was hoarse with sleep and disbelief. "What in God's name are you doing here at this hour?" I lifted my duffel bag slightly. It was all I could manage without my throat closing up. "Come in," he said immediately, stepping aside. "Come in." The living room was exactly as it had been in 1995, the same floral couch Mom had reupholstered twice, the same family photos lining the mantel, the same warm, unchanging familiarity that made time feel softer. "William." Mom's voice called from upstairs, sharp, alert, the way only a retired school principal's could be. "Who's at the door at this ungodly hour?" "It's Jade, Victoria," Dad replied. There was a pause, a long one. I could almost hear the cogs turning in Mom's head. Jade, unannounced, with luggage, before sunrise. Then her voice again. "I'll be right down." Dad guided me to the couch and took the duffel bag from my hands, setting it by the stairs. "I'll make coffee," he said. It was his reflex for every crisis. Coffee for bad news, coffee for car accidents, coffee for heartbreak. I sank into the familiar cushions and felt something inside me unlock. My hands trembled, not from fear or cold, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen. Of someone saying my name and meeting my eyes while doing it. "They've been pretending I don't exist," I told him when he returned from the kitchen, skipping any pretense of small talk. "Cole and Emma for a month. Like I'm a chair. My voice cracked. Like I'm the house settling." Dad's expression shifted in a way I'd rarely seen. Confusion first, then dawning comprehension, then quiet, dangerous anger, the kind that doesn't flare but burns steady. He'd spent 40 years as a civil engineer, solving problems with numbers and precision, but right then, he looked ready to solve Cole with his fists. "How long?" he asked. 30 days, I said softly. I counted. He nodded, jaw tightening. "And you left?" "I found divorce papers," I whispered. He'd already signed them. Just left them out for me with a sticky note telling me where to sign. That son of a dad caught himself, glancing toward the stairs where Mom's footsteps were approaching. "That's not how you end 20 years. "Apparently," I said quietly, "it is." Mom appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her quilted robe, gray hair braided neatly down her shoulder, the same way she'd worn it since I was a child. Mom's eyes flicked between me and Dad, her retired principal instincts already working through every unspoken detail. "I'll make breakfast," she said briskly. "Jade, you look half-starved." "William, set the table." That was my mother in crisis mode, handling disaster through routine and food. 20 minutes later, I was sitting at their familiar kitchen table, the same one where I'd done algebra homework, celebrated birthdays, and once announced that I was going to marry Cole. Mom placed a plate in front of me, scrambled eggs, buttered toast, a bowl of fresh fruit, and still warm scones she must have baked the day before. She poured coffee, sat opposite me, and delivered her verdict in the calm, clinical tone of a woman who had spent 4 decades telling hard truths to students. "You've been disappearing for years, haven't you? Not just this month." I opened my mouth to protest, but she lifted her hand. "Your Christmas cards used to tell stories, Jade, funny things Emma said, books you were reading, thoughts about your life. Lately they've been nothing but store-bought greetings with names scribbled underneath. Your voice on the phone has sounded mechanical. You stopped talking about what you enjoy. Everything's been Cole thinks or Emma wants." Each word landed like a stone, small but impossible to ignore. "You've turned yourself into wallpaper, honey," Mom said softly, though her tone didn't lose its edge. "And wallpaper eventually gets painted over." Her words hurt because they were true. I had spent years sanding down my own edges, being smaller, quieter, more convenient, believing that was what made a good wife and mother. By the time Cole and Emma stopped acknowledging me, I had already erased most of myself. "I don't want you signing those divorce papers," Mom continued firmly. "Not yet. Not until you know what you actually want, not what Cole wants from you. And you're staying here at least 3 months. No impulsive decisions made out of pain." "Mom, I can't stay here that long. I have a job, You have a part-time position at the library that will understand if you take personal leave," she interrupted gently but decisively. "What else do you really have, Jade?" I stared down at my plate. I couldn't answer. What did I have? Half a house at best. A daughter who called me white noise. A husband who preferred pretending I didn't exist. 3 months, Mom repeated, unwavering. "Promise me." "Okay," I whispered. 3 months. Dad reached across the table and squeezed my hand. For the first time in months, I was somewhere people actually saw me, even if being seen came with uncomfortable truths. The next evening, I was helping Mom sort tools in the garden shed when a car pulled into the driveway. I didn't recognize the silver Honda until my younger brother Richard stepped out, carrying 2 large paper bags that smelled unmistakably of Fitzgerald's takeout. "Mom called you," I said, not bothering to frame it as a question. "Mom called me," he confirmed, pulling me into a hug that smelled faintly of chalk dust and acrylic paint. "Drove 4 hours. You're welcome." Richard, 38, taught high school art and had gone through his own divorce 3 years earlier. We sat on the back porch with cartons of fried rice and lo mein, the spring air cooling around us. "Want to hear about my marriage?" he asked, poking at his food with chopsticks. "Not really." "Too bad," he said, setting the carton down and meeting my eyes. "My ex-wife spent 5 years making me feel like teaching wasn't real work. Like I was a man playing with crayons while she had a serious career. She said my hobbies were childish, my friends were immature, my interests pointless. I kept shrinking myself to fit her expectations. By the end, there was nothing left to shrink. I recognized every word of that pattern. You know what I learned?" Richard went on. "When someone makes you feel invisible, they're telling you exactly how much they value you. Believe them. Don't waste your time trying to prove your worth to people who've already decided you don't have any." "So, you're saying I should just give up on my marriage?" "I'm saying maybe you're not running away from your marriage," he replied. "Maybe you're running toward yourself." He pulled a small sketchbook from his jacket pocket and drew a simple timeline. Who was Jade before she met Cole? What made her laugh? What did she love? What were her dreams? I stared at the blank page, realizing I couldn't answer. The woman I used to be had faded so completely that I couldn't even picture her shape anymore. 3 months, Richard reminded me. Mom told me her rule. Use that time to find her again, the Jade from before. See if she's still someone worth being. After he left, I went up to my childhood bedroom. Mom had turned it into a guest room, but my old bookshelf was still there, filled with novels I devoured at 16, 17, 18. Books from before Cole, before Emma, before I became someone whose existence was negotiable. My phone sat silent on the nightstand. It had been that way for 7 days now, no calls from Cole asking where I was, no texts from Emma checking if I was okay. Part of me had expected anger, furious messages ordering me to come home and stop being dramatic. Another part had hoped for concern, even a sliver of worry. But instead, There was nothing. Just silence. They didn't care that I was gone, or worse, they were relieved. I cycled through emotions too fast to name them. Rage at their indifference, grief over what I'd lost, shame for letting myself become so small, and fear of what came next in a life I didn't recognize anymore. That night, I woke at 3 a.m., heart pounding, convinced I'd made an enormous mistake. Maybe I should go back. Maybe I should apologize. Maybe I should sign those papers and accept whatever scraps of connection they offered. Then I remembered Cole brushing past me as if I were furniture. Emma asking if he'd heard white noise. The empty refrigerator they'd left like that on purpose. Each image hardened something inside me. Grief shifted into determination. By the end of that first week, something began to change. On Saturday morning, I woke at 9:30, the latest I'd slept in years, without an alarm, without guilt, without anyone depending on me. I made coffee at my own pace and carried it out to Mom's garden, where I opened a novel I'd been meaning to read for months. For 3 uninterrupted hours, I read simply because I wanted to. Such a small act, but it felt like remembering how to breathe again. Those 3 hours became my anchor. Every morning afterward, I followed the same ritual: coffee, sunlight, a book. No demands. No invisible labor. No clock dictating my worth. It should have felt indulgent. Instead, it felt like rediscovering that I was human. 3 weeks into my stay, Dad approached me one evening and asked gently if I might want to update my resume on his computer. Just in case you decide to look for something full-time, he said carefully, not pushing, only offering. I sat down at Dad's desk in his study, the same oak desk that still carried the faint scent of his old pipe tobacco, though he'd quit nearly 10 years ago. The computer was ancient by modern standards, but it powered on with a gentle hum. I opened the browser to check my email, hoping to find a few reference files for updating my resume. That's when I saw it. My old email account was still logged in from a visit months earlier. A handful of unread messages blinked in the inbox, mostly spam, newsletters, and coupons, but one subject line stopped me cold. Following up on our discussion about Emma's college applications and the special circumstances you mentioned. The sender was Kiko Nakamura, Emma's school counselor. Special circumstances. What special circumstances? My hand hovered over the mouse, torn between instinct and dread. I shouldn't open it. I knew that. It wasn't addressed to me. But the phrase special circumstances connected to my daughter overrode every trace of restraint I had. I clicked. The message was part of a long chain. My pulse quickened as I scrolled up to the earliest email. 6 months earlier, Cole had initiated contact with Ms. Nakamura. His first message looked harmless, typical parent questions about deadlines, scholarships, and college essays. But the second message changed everything. I wanted to discuss some family circumstances that might affect Emma's applications, Cole had written. My wife has been dealing with certain personal challenges, mental health issues that have made her increasingly unreliable. I'm doing my best to keep things stable for Emma during her senior year, but Jade's condition has been difficult on the household. Personal challenges. Mental health issues. Jade's condition. My hands began to shake. I scrolled further, each message layering another twist of betrayal. Cole had built an entire narrative over months, methodical, persuasive, and devastating. According to him, I was spiraling into depression, struggling to keep up with daily routines, emotionally distant, incapable of maintaining normal responsibilities. He cast himself as the patient, overworked husband holding the family together while I crumbled. Ms. Nakamura's replies were kind, professional, supportive. She sympathized with his burden. She even offered to make notes on Emma's college records, stating that she'd persevered despite challenging family circumstances. There were no challenging family circumstances. There was no breakdown. There was only Cole, carefully destroying my credibility one polite email at a time, creating a paper trail that painted me as unstable, unfit, and detached. And he'd started this 6 months ago, 2 months before the silent treatment began. This wasn't reactionary cruelty. It was premeditated. My breathing came shallow and fast. I printed every message, though my hands trembled so badly I could barely feed the paper into the printer tray. Then, almost on instinct, I opened a new browser tab and logged into our joint bank account. I had managed our finances for 20 years. Every account number, every password, every recurring bill, I knew them all. Part of me expected the login to fail. Surely he'd changed the password after I left. But it worked. Of course it did. Why would he bother locking me out? I was already gone. The account loaded, and the number on the screen made my stomach drop. The balance was $3,847. Just 3 months earlier, it had been over $31,000. I pulled up the transaction history and watched our savings vanish line by line. At first, small transfers, $1,200 to an unfamiliar account. Then $500, then $1,000 more. Over 8 months, he had steadily moved money, every transfer to the same external account, Pettin Personal Banking. Cole had opened a separate account in his own name and had been quietly siphoning funds from ours. The totals were sickening. Nearly $28,000 redirected into his private account. The timing of each withdrawal matched moments in our life. $2,300 spent on Emma's birthday photographer, then $3,000 shifted to his personal account days later. Lavish dinners I hadn't been invited to, charged to our joint card, mirrored by identical transfers to his secret fund. He had been dismantling our financial safety net piece by piece, ensuring that when I finally left, I'd have almost nothing. The timeline was unmistakable. 8 months ago, the hidden transfers began. 6 months ago, the counselor emails started. 4 months ago, the systematic silence and isolation took hold. 3 weeks ago, the divorce papers appeared. This wasn't a collapse. It was architecture. A deliberate demolition of my life. My phone rang, jolting me so hard I nearly knocked the mouse off the desk. The caller ID read, Madison Nakamura, my supervisor from the university library. Jade, she began carefully, her tone cautious, uneasy. I need to tell you something, and I really hope you won't shoot the messenger. My pulse thudded in my ears. What's wrong? Cole called the library yesterday, she said slowly. He told HR that you were having personal difficulties, that you needed extended leave for health reasons. She hesitated, then continued. He implied, without saying it outright, that you were experiencing a breakdown. He even suggested we might need to reconsider your long-term role, in case you wouldn't be able to handle the workload. For a moment, the room tilted around me. He what? I thought it was strange, Madison said quickly. You've worked here for 12 years, Jade. You've never missed a deadline. Never once called in sick without reason. You've always been reliable. So I wanted to check with you directly. Are you all right? Is there something I should know? I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to steady even as my heart raced. I'm fine, Madison. More than fine. Cole and I are separated. I'm staying with my parents while I figure things out, but I'm not having a breakdown, and I fully intend to return to work when I'm ready. That's what I thought, Madison replied, relief softening her voice. Then her tone shifted firmer, more knowing. Jade, I've seen this before. My sister went through something almost identical. Her ex-husband had tried to destroy her career before their divorce, laying a careful trail that made her seem unreliable, so he could argue for full custody and reduce his financial obligations. Madison's voice was steady but serious. I wanted you to know what Cole's doing, Jade. It feels like someone building a case. After we hung up, I just sat there, staring at the computer screen, the printed emails, the bank statements scattered across Dad's desk. The pieces were beginning to align into a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't deny. Cole hadn't acted on impulse. He'd been orchestrating my disappearance for at least 8 months, maybe longer. He'd been moving money, constructing a narrative of my instability, turning Emma against me, reaching out to my workplace to erode my credibility. Then he'd made home unbearable so I'd leave on my own, handing him the last piece he needed, evidence of abandonment. If this ever went to court, how would it look? A mother who'd walked out without warning. A woman with no savings because she'd been too unstable to notice her husband draining their accounts. A wife whose daughter's counselor had documented mental health concerns. An employee whose supervisor had been warned about her supposed decline. He'd built the perfect case. Cole would win the house. He'd get full custody of Emma, even though she was nearly 18. I'd walk away with almost nothing, no money, no credibility, no career, no daughter. I heard the back door open. Richard was home again for his daily visit, another paper bag of takeout in hand. He stepped into the study, took one look at me, and froze. "Kat, you okay?" he asked gently, setting the food down. I didn't answer right away. He came closer, seeing my face. "What happened?" Wordlessly, I pushed the papers toward him, the emails, the bank records, Madison's warning. I watched his expression shift, first confusion, then anger, then a sharp, calculating focus I'd never seen in him before. Richard, my artistic, easygoing younger brother who taught high school art, suddenly looked like someone dissecting evidence. He took out a notebook and began writing. 8 months ago, money transfers begin, he murmured. 6 months ago, emails to the counselor start. 4 months ago, ignoring campaign. 3 weeks ago, divorce papers. He drew lines connecting them. Then he looked up. "This isn't random cruelty, Kat. It's calculated destruction." His tone was calm, but his jaw was tight. "He's been creating conditions so unbearable you'd leave, giving him proof of abandonment. Combine that with the story that you're unstable, and in any custody or financial dispute, he wins." Until that moment, I'd thought Cole was just heartless, that he'd fallen out of love and handled it cruelly. But this wasn't emotional neglect, it was a deliberate strategy. Cole had dismantled my life with the precision of a businessman closing a hostile acquisition. No passion, no guilt, just efficiency. "What do I do?" I whispered. Richard met my eyes. His voice was calm but hard. "You don't sign those papers. You document everything. You build your own case. And then you find a lawyer who knows how to handle people like him." "What mistake did he make?" I asked. "He assumed you'd never find out," Richard said. "He assumed you'd stay broken." Then a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "He forgot that invisible women see everything." His words echoed through the room, sharp, undeniable truth. "He forgot that invisible women see everything." I looked down at the evidence covering Dad's desk, the printed emails, the bank statements, Madison's warning scrawled on a note. 8 months of systematic destruction, documented and undeniable. "I'm not signing those papers," I said aloud, my voice steadying as the decision took shape. Richard nodded once. "Good. What else?" "I'm not contacting Cole. No calls, no explanations, no confrontations. Nothing." Richard understood immediately. "You're going underground. Let him think you're broken, healing somewhere. Meanwhile, you rebuild." "Exactly," I said. "Comfortable people make mistakes. I need him to believe he's already won." That night, I went to the local credit union and opened a new account. No links to our old bank, no shared access. I transferred what little I had left from my library paychecks, the small amount Cole hadn't touched. It wasn't much, but it was mine. When I returned, Dad stood in the doorway of the study, his glasses perched low on his nose. "You're documenting everything?" "Everything," I said. He sat down beside me, pulling the bank statements closer. "Let me show you something." For the next hour, my father, the man who'd balanced ledgers and budgets for 40 years, who'd taught me to reconcile my first checkbook when I was 12, walked me through the numbers. He was smart, Dad admitted. Small transfers, irregular timing, nothing that would trigger alerts. But he made one mistake. "What?" "He left a pattern," Dad said simply. "Courts don't like patterns. They show intent." He opened a spreadsheet, mapping every transfer by date and amount. "We'll need everything: bank records, emails, notes about his contact with the school and your employer. Build a timeline that shows premeditation." Mom joined us a few minutes later, carrying a tray of tea. "I called Marcus Fitzgerald," she said, setting it down. "She retired from Lincoln High 3 years ago, but she remembers you from volunteering in Emma's classes. She's writing a character reference. So are Catherine Walsh and Tom Fletcher. People who knew you as a reliable parent and volunteer." I looked at my parents, both in their 70s, both supposed to be resting and enjoying quiet days, and realized they were mobilizing every ounce of experience they had to protect me. Thank you, I whispered. Mom gave me a look both fierce and loving. Don't thank us. You're our daughter. We protect our own. 6 weeks after I'd shown up with nothing but a duffel bag and a fractured sense of self, my phone rang. The number wasn't one I recognized. I almost let it go to voicemail. Cole had been calling from blocked numbers lately, but something made me answer. Jade Pettin. The voice was calm, professional, female. Speaking, I said cautiously. This is Dr. Rachel Winters. I'm the director of the Riverside Library System, the woman said. Madison Tanaka gave me your contact information. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I stepped out onto the back porch, away from the sound of Mom cooking dinner. Of course. Madison spoke highly of your work, Dr. Winters continued. 12 years at the University Library, your cataloging overhaul, your outreach initiatives. I'm impressed. Papers rustled faintly on her end. We have an opening for a senior research librarian. It's a higher title than your current position, with a better salary and full benefits. The position is yours if you want it. I gripped the phone tighter. Just like that. Not exactly. Her tone softened. Madison told me a little about your situation. I went through something similar about 5 years ago. A husband who tried to sabotage my career during our divorce, spread stories that I was unstable, unreliable. I know what it looks like when someone is trying to destroy a professional reputation. I see, I murmured. You're too good at what you do to let him take that from you, Jade, she said gently. This could be a fresh start, in a city where his version of events hasn't reached anyone, where you can rebuild without fighting the lies. She paused for a beat. The position starts in 3 weeks. Is that enough time to relocate? 3 weeks. Enough time to find an apartment, pack what little I owned, and leave behind the town where I'd been Mrs. Cole Pettin for 20 years. Yes, I said finally. That's plenty of time. Excellent. I'll email you the formal offer. Welcome to Riverside, Jade. After we hung up, I sat on the porch steps, watching the sun sink behind Mom's garden. For the first time since finding those divorce papers, I felt something other than fear or anger. I felt hope. 2 months into my silence, my phone rang, and this time, it was Emma. Not the house line, not Dad's cell. My personal number. Her name lit the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Mom? Her voice sounded different, colder, clipped. Where are you? I'm safe, I said evenly. I'm fine. Dad says you're having some kind of breakdown, that you just left without telling anyone. I'm not having a breakdown, I said, keeping my voice calm. I left because I was being treated like I didn't exist in my own home. There's a difference. That's not Mom, I need you to come back. I have to submit my college applications, and I need your signature for financial aid forms. This is important. Not I miss you. Not are you okay? Not even I'm sorry for how we treated you. Just I need your signature. Then I heard it, Cole's voice in the background, muffled but unmistakable. Tell her she's being selfish. Tell her she's ruining your future. My daughter wasn't calling on her own. She was reading from a script. Something inside me went very still, then solid. Emma, I said softly, I'm not having a breakdown. I'm having a breakthrough. When you're ready to talk honestly, without your father telling you what to say, call me back. Mom, wait. I hung up. My hands were trembling, but my resolve felt like steel. Richard appeared in the doorway, having clearly overheard. He crossed the porch and put a hand on my shoulder. That was perfect, he said quietly. Don't let them pull you back into that dynamic. She didn't even ask if I was okay, I said, my voice shaking. I know, he replied gently. Because she's been told you're not. She's been fed his version of events for months. It'll take time for her to question it. If she ever does. If she ever does, he agreed. But you can't sacrifice yourself on the altar of maybe. You gave her 20 years. Now give yourself a chance. 3 weeks later, I stood in my new apartment in Riverside Meadows, a small 1-bedroom with a functional kitchen, a sunlit living room, and secondhand furniture that was clean and mine. The mismatched dishes, the thrift store couch, the hand-me-down curtains, every imperfect piece belonged only to me. That first night, I ate Fitzgerald's takeout on the couch and realized something profound. I wasn't happy yet, but I was content. Content in a way I hadn't felt in years. No one could walk past me like I was invisible. No one could discuss me like I was broken machinery. I found a yoga studio 3 blocks away, joined an evening class led by a silver-haired instructor who called everyone dear. I joined a Thursday night book club at the library. I met my neighbor, Patricia, a middle school teacher recently divorced, who invited me on morning walks through quiet streets lined with maple trees. My days became steady, my routine simple: wake without an alarm, drink coffee slowly, work where people valued my expertise, spend evenings however I chose. Weekends were for farmers markets, hiking trails, and independent films downtown. I learned I liked red wine better than white, that I preferred mystery novels to romance, that sleeping late on Sundays without guilt felt like luxury. 3 months turned into 6. 6 became a year. The seasons changed, and I changed with them, not in dramatic bursts, but gradually, like a plant finally getting enough light. I wasn't just surviving Cole's demolition anymore. I was rediscovering who I'd been before I became Mrs. Petton. I was finding the woman who'd laughed over spilled coffee at conferences, who'd dreamed up ridiculous marketing slogans, who'd once believed she deserved space in the world. She had always been there, buried under 20 years of shrinking herself to fit someone else's comfort. Now she was emerging, steadier, wiser, stronger than Cole could have imagined. Because he'd made one fatal miscalculation, he thought erasing me would make me disappear. Instead, it set me free. Freedom, I discovered, wasn't one grand moment, it was 5 years of small choices, each one building on the last until, one day, you look back and barely recognize the person you used to be. Year 1 was survival, learning to sleep alone without loneliness, to cook for one without feeling the absence of 2 empty chairs, to make decisions that affected no one but me. I enrolled in night classes at Riverside University, pursuing the master's degree in library science I'd given up when I married Cole. He'd called it unnecessary back then, said my bachelor's degree was enough for part-time library work. He had always implied that pursuing more education was selfish, a distraction from real responsibilities when we had a family to support. But he'd been wrong. It wasn't unnecessary at all. I immersed myself in coursework that reignited parts of my mind I hadn't used in years: digital archiving systems, information management theory, emerging technologies, advanced library sciences. The work was demanding, but in the best possible way, challenging because it required thought, effort, curiosity, not emotional endurance. I'd forgotten what it felt like to wrestle with a problem that had a solution if you were simply persistent enough to find it. My thesis focused on digital preservation strategies for small community libraries, unpretentious, practical, deeply needed. When it was published in the Journal of Library Administration during my 3rd year, Dr. Winters showed up to the office with a bottle of cheap Prosecco and plastic cups. "You're too good at this to stay in research," she told me, pouring a cup and handing it over. "I'm promoting you to associate director. More pay, more responsibility, more visibility. You ready for that?" I was. It turned out I had a talent for leadership, for mentoring younger librarians, reorganizing inefficient systems, fighting for better budgets. My colleagues sought my advice, invited me to dinner, asked for my opinions. They valued me, not because I was quiet or accommodating, but because I was competent. After years of invisibility, being seen for my expertise felt revolutionary. In my 2nd year at Riverside, Patricia from next door introduced me to her book club. That's where I met Kiko, a real estate agent with a laugh like cracked glass and strong opinions about everything, and Rachel, an ER nurse with a dark, hilarious view of her ex-husband's shortcomings. We became fast friends, calling ourselves the Phoenix Club, women who'd risen from the ashes of failed marriages, scarred but unbroken. My ex told me I was too loud, Kiko said one night, swirling her 3rd glass of wine. I spent 15 years trying to be smaller, quieter, less opinionated. She paused, smiling faintly. "You know what I learned?" "What?" Rachel asked. "I'm not too loud," Kiko said. "He was too fragile." We all drank to that. I dated occasionally, small reminders that I was still a woman, still interesting. Daniel, a history professor, took me to art galleries and whispered gossip about the French Revolution. We lasted 3 months before deciding we were better as friends. Later, Richard, a librarian from another branch, made me laugh over bad coffee, but he wanted more than I was ready to give. We ended things kindly. I wasn't searching for another relationship. I was learning to have one with myself. Through it all, I kept absolute silence regarding Cole and Emma. No calls. No emails. No midnight social media searches. I blocked them everywhere, building a digital wall between my old life and the new. It wasn't avoidance, it was strategy. My lawyer, Madison Tanaka, razor-sharp, mid-50s, and famous for dismantling opponents with perfect civility, had been clear from the beginning. She wore low heels, precise suits, and carried an aura of quiet authority. "Let him think he won," she'd said during our first consultation. "Let him get comfortable in that illusion. Comfortable people make mistakes. Comfortable people get sloppy." So I did. I let Cole believe I had dissolved, that his erasure had succeeded. I paid the court-ordered child support, $1,400 a month without fail, even though Emma had been nearly 18 when I left and I could have challenged it. I wanted the records to speak for me, steady, responsible, consistent. I kept meticulous documentation, bank statements proving stable income, employment records showing promotions, letters from colleagues and neighbors affirming reliability. A case I might never need, but one I was quietly building just the same. Mom and Dad occasionally shared small updates about Emma. She'd chosen a college 3 hours away, far enough for independence, close enough for weekend visits. Marketing major. Active in student organizations. Dating someone seriously by sophomore year. Each detail pierced me in a quiet, familiar way. But I said nothing. I couldn't force her to see the truth. All I could do was ensure that when she was ready, if she was ready, I would still be standing, solid and whole. Her 18th birthday passed in silence. I allowed myself one day to grieve, flipping through old photo albums, crying into Patricia's shoulder, drinking too much wine, and waking up the next morning with a headache that felt like penance. Then I got up and kept moving. By the 3rd year, something shifted. I realized I didn't just tolerate my life anymore, I liked it. I traveled to conferences in Chicago, San Francisco, and Boston, cities I'd once dreamed of visiting, but never had time for when I was managing a household that didn't want me. I wandered through museums alone, ate dinner alone, and discovered that I actually enjoyed my own company. I took a pottery class at the community center and was spectacularly terrible at it. Every bowl leaned like it had survived an earthquake. But I loved the process, the way clay responded to patience and pressure, how imperfections could be smoothed with wet fingertips. I experimented in the kitchen, cooking meals that didn't need anyone else's approval. I learned I loved Thai food so spicy it made my eyes water. I preferred documentaries to sitcoms. And I decided that sleeping late on Sundays without guilt was one of life's quiet luxuries. I began journaling, slowly untangling my marriage on paper. As I reread my entries from the first 3 years, I could trace my transformation from a woman questioning her worth to one who could finally name Cole's behavior for what it had always been, abuse dressed as control. One entry from year 4 stood out. Cole's cruelty saved my life. If he'd been simply inattentive, just a little cold, just a little distant, I would have stayed forever, convincing myself things could be fixed. But his deliberate campaign to erase me left me no choice but to walk away. His cruelty had forced my freedom. That year, I understood something profound. I didn't miss my marriage. I missed the illusion of what I thought it was, the fantasy of partnership that had never existed. The truth was 20 years of compressing myself to fit a man who mistook submission for love. Cole hadn't suddenly become cruel. He'd always been that way. I had just been too invested in the dream to see the reality clearly. Year 5 arrived quietly. I was 48. I didn't own property, had only modest savings, a job I loved, and friends who genuinely wanted to spend time with me. By anyone else's standards, my life wasn't impressive, no grand house, no glittering career title, no curated highlight reel for social media, but it was mine. Entirely, unapologetically mine. That Tuesday evening in late April, I was heating a pot of tomato soup and debating between an ocean documentary I'd been saving or a mindless cooking competition when my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a known number, probably spam about duct cleaning or extended warranties. Still, something, instinct, fate, maybe boredom, made me answer. "Hello, Jade." Cole's voice. After 5 years of silence, suddenly there he was, spilling into my kitchen through a small rectangle of glass and circuits. Every muscle in my body locked. My first impulse was to hang up, block the number, and preserve the separation I'd fought so hard to build. But curiosity overrode self-protection. "I'm here," I managed, gripping the counter until my knuckles whitened. He sounded different, older, uncertain, stripped of the commanding confidence that had once defined him. I wasn't sure if this was still your number." "It is," I said simply. I didn't elaborate, didn't tell him that I'd kept the same number in case Emma ever decided to call. A silence stretched. I heard faint background noise of voices, music, the hum of conversation. He wasn't alone. "How have you been?" The absurdity of the question almost made me laugh. 5 years of calculated silence, of pretending I didn't exist, and now he wanted to know how I'd been. "Fine," I said evenly. "Why are you calling, Cole?" He drew in a breath, the kind people take before delivering difficult news. "Jade, Emma is getting married." The words hit like a physical blow. My daughter, 22 now, was getting married to someone I had never met, planning a wedding I hadn't known existed. "Married," I repeated slowly, because my brain needed time to catch up. "Yes," he said. "To a wonderful young man named Janet Hartman. They met in college. They've been together 2 years. The wedding is next month." Next month. 5 weeks away. She'd chosen a venue, flowers, colors, maybe even a dress, all without me. "I hope she's happy," I said finally. "She is," Cole replied. Then his voice shifted, hesitant, almost uneasy. "You should come to the wedding." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. "You want me at the wedding?" "Yes. She's your daughter. You should be there." As he spoke, explaining dates, times, and venue details, I heard something buried in his tone I hadn't expected: fear. A faint tremor in his voice, like a crack in polished marble. "She misses you," he added quietly. I laughed then, a sharp, humorless sound. Funny way of showing it. 5 years, Cole. Not one call. Not one text. Not even a holiday card. But now she misses me. People change, Jade. Time changes things. Yes, I agreed coldly. It certainly does. I should have said no. Should have told him exactly what he could do with his invitation, hung up, blocked his number, and gone back to my simple, peaceful life. But instead, I heard myself say, "I'll think about it." After he hung up, I stood in my kitchen staring at the phone, my soup long since gone cold. My daughter was getting married to someone named Janet Hartman at the Riverside Country Club in 5 weeks, and I had just agreed to consider attending. The absurdity hit hard. 5 years of silence, and suddenly I was supposed to show up as if nothing had happened, as if Cole hadn't destroyed my reputation, as if I hadn't been erased from their lives. I needed perspective. I needed truth. So I opened the Phoenix Club group chat and typed, "Emergency meeting. My place tomorrow night. Bring wine." Patricia replied first, on it. "Everything okay?" "Define okay," I typed back. The next evening, my small living room filled with the women who had become my chosen family. Patricia arrived with 2 bottles of red and a worried frown. Kiko brought a spread of expensive cheeses and her trademark bluntness. Rachel showed up still in her scrubs after a 12-hour ER shift, holding chocolate like medicine. I told them everything: Cole's call, the wedding, the years of silence suddenly shattered. "Why no?" Patricia asked immediately, eyes narrowing. "What's changed?" "Maybe Emma insisted," I said, though even I didn't sound convinced. Kiko poured wine with the confidence of someone used to bad ex stories. "In my experience, people don't remember you exist unless you're useful to them." "What do they need from you, Jade?" I hesitated. "I don't know. My guess?" Rachel said quietly. "Your presence. Your blessing. Your compliance." She set down her glass, leaning forward. They want you to show up, smile, and fit neatly into the story they've been telling people. The gracious ex-wife invited back. The mother reunited with her daughter. It makes them look generous. The wine burned on my tongue, or maybe that was bitterness. But here's the real question, Rachel continued, her tone softening. What do you want? Not what's fair. Not what's expected. What do you actually want? I placed my glass on the coffee table and tried to find words I'd avoided for years. I want to see her, I said at last. I want to know if she ever thinks about me. If she remembers the notes I used to tuck into her lunches. If she ever wonders what really happened 5 years ago. And? Kiko prompted gently. And I want Cole to see me. The admission felt raw, sharp, liberating. I want him to see what he tried to erase, the woman who rebuilt herself into someone he can't control or define anymore. Patricia's lips curved into a slow, approving smile. Now we're getting somewhere. It's not revenge, I said quickly. No, Rachel agreed. It's not revenge. It's closure. And it's justice. He tried to destroy you. Showing up whole and thriving? That's the best response you could give him. We talked for 3 hours, analyzing motives, weighing outcomes, dissecting risks. By the time the wine glasses were empty and laughter had turned to thoughtful silence, I'd made my decision. I was going to the wedding. The next morning, I met Madison Tanaka at our usual downtown cafe. She arrived precisely on time, her leather briefcase in one hand, her coffee order already in the other. Sensible heels, immaculate posture, every inch the woman you wanted on your side in a fight. You're going, she said, reading my expression before I even sat down. I'm going, I confirmed. Madison nodded once, sliding into her chair like an attorney settling into cross-examination mode. Then we do this strategically. This could be a trap or an opportunity. Possibly both. She pulled a legal pad from her briefcase and began jotting notes in her precise handwriting. If you go armored. Treat it like a deposition. Speak only when necessary. Observe everything. Give them nothing, no tears, no anger, no explanations they can later twist. You are composed, dignified, present because you choose to be. I can do that. Good. She tapped her pen. Also, consider bringing someone a date, a friend, anyone. Proof that you've moved on. Men like Cole can't stand the idea that you survived, that you're thriving. Show him that. It's more devastating than any revenge you could plan. I hesitated, then shook my head. No, this is something I need to do alone. Bringing someone would look like I'm trying to prove something. Fair point. She made another note. There's also a legal benefit. Attendance demonstrates your continued involvement in Emma's life, your emotional stability, your willingness to be the bigger person. It's small, but documented goodwill never hurts. Emma's 22. There won't be custody issues, I reminded her. You'd be surprised what resurfaces in divorce modifications, Madison replied. Better to have a record that you made the effort, even after years of exclusion. As I sipped my coffee, I realized this wasn't just a personal milestone, it was a strategic maneuver in a game I hadn't realized I was still playing. I had 3 weeks to prepare. I treated it like preparing for battle, because in many ways, that's exactly what it was. The dress took 2 days to find. Elegant but understated. Sophisticated but not extravagant. Something that said, I'm doing well, without shouting, I'm trying too hard. A navy blue sheath with clean lines, modest jewelry, and heels that wouldn't betray me on polished floors. I got my hair trimmed and styled, nothing dramatic, just refined. Carmen, the stylist, was cheerful and talkative. Going somewhere special? She asked. My daughter's wedding, I said, the words strange and heavy in my mouth. How wonderful. You must be so excited. I smiled politely and changed the subject. At home, I rehearsed, not my appearance, but my responses. How have you been? Neutral tone. I've been well, thank you. Where have you been? Slightly accusatory. I've been building a life for myself. And you? Why did you leave? Direct confrontation. Because I was being treated like I didn't exist. I chose to exist elsewhere. Truthful. Controlled. No anger. I imagined Emma confronting me at the reception, Cole pretending to be gracious for his new in-laws, the whispers from people who'd likely heard his version of the story. No matter the scenario, my mantra was the same: stay calm, stay grounded, stay dignified. Patricia called 3 times that week. "You don't have to do this alone, Jade," she said each time. "I know," I told her, "but I need to." "Why?" "Because showing up alone proves I don't need validation. I'm there because I choose to be, not because someone's holding my hand." The night before the wedding, sleep was impossible. I laid out my dress, double-checked the route to the Riverside Country Club, filled my car's tank. Then, for the first time in 5 years, I opened the box of old photo albums I'd kept tucked in my closet. Emma as a baby, round-cheeked and grinning. Emma at 7, paint in her hair, missing her front teeth, proudly holding a spelling bee trophy. Emma at 12, awkward, smiling, the world still simple. I let myself feel it. The ache of the years I'd missed. The grief of memories that belonged to a version of me long gone. I cried for 20 minutes, then wiped my face, put the photos away, and whispered to my reflection, tomorrow isn't about reclaiming the past. It's about facing it. The morning dawned perfect, bright sky, soft breeze, sunlight catching on dew-soaked grass. The kind of day that made weddings look effortless. I was awake at 6, too restless to stay in bed. Toast I couldn't eat. A shower I barely felt. Careful makeup, polished, not theatrical. The navy dress fit perfectly. Comfortable heels, simple earrings. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who'd survived what should have broken her. A woman rebuilt, solid and real. Good enough. The drive to the Riverside Country Club took 40 minutes along highways lined with flowering trees. I used the time to steady my breathing, reminding myself of the lessons I'd learned in yoga: inhale strength, exhale fear. I whispered quietly to the rhythm of my heartbeat, I don't need anything from them. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Not understanding. I'm attending because Emma is still my daughter. Because I refuse to be erased. The club rose ahead of me like something from a glossy magazine: marble columns, manicured gardens, valet attendants in spotless uniforms. I drove past the valet station, parking in a quiet corner where my 10-year-old sedan wouldn't draw attention among the luxury cars. For 15 minutes, I sat there, watching guests arrive, women in silk dresses, men in tailored suits, everyone glowing with confidence and wealth. I'd never belonged in this world, not even when I was married to Cole. But now, I didn't need to. I'd built something better, something that couldn't be taken away. I checked my reflection one last time in the mirror, picked up my small purse, and stepped out of the car. It was time to remind them what they'd lost when they decided I didn't matter. The entrance to the country club felt like crossing into another realm, a place where wealth whispered rather than shouted, where every detail, from the faint scent of lilies to the gleam of marble floors, reminded you that power didn't need to announce itself. I bypassed the guest book, not wanting to draw more attention to myself than necessary, and followed the flow of well-dressed strangers toward the ceremony space. The venue unfolded like a page from a bridal magazine, white roses cascading from every surface, silk ribbons in soft champagne tones, and enough candlelight to make the afternoon feel romantic rather than excessive. I chose a seat in the back row, close enough to witness, but far enough to slip away if things went wrong. Around me, guests chatted easily, the kind of effortless conversation shared by people who all knew one another, who belonged to the same social circles, the same country clubs, the same vacation spots. I recognized no one. Not a single face. 5 years ago, I would have known them all: Cole's colleagues, our neighbors, the parents from Emma's school. But an entirely new social ecosystem had clearly formed in my absence. These were people from Cole's post-Jade life, Janet's wealthy family, Emma's college friends who'd never met her mother. The evidence of my complete erasure surrounded me. A string quartet began to play something classical and emotional I didn't recognize. The guests quieted, stood, and turned toward the back entrance. The procession began, bridesmaids in soft sage green, groomsmen in perfectly tailored suits, flower girls scattering petals with varying levels of enthusiasm. Then Emma appeared. My breath caught painfully in my chest. She was breathtaking, Not simply lovely, but stunning in a way that seemed to stop time itself. Her dress looked handcrafted by angels, delicate lace, flawless tailoring, a design that likely cost more than 6 months of my salary. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, her makeup subtle and perfect, her smile radiant as she held her father's arm. Cole looked exactly as he always had, successful, distinguished, the proud father of the bride. His suit was immaculate, his posture confident, his expression the practiced balance of joy and bittersweet emotion expected of the moment. They began down the aisle together, and I felt the full weight of 5 missing years press down on me at once. I had missed so much: college tours, meeting boyfriends, the engagement announcement, the dress fittings, cake tastings, all the small mother-daughter moments I had once imagined sharing. They had taken them from me, or perhaps I had lost them, depending on whose version of the story you believed. Then Emma's eyes met mine. The shock on her face was unmistakable, pure disbelief mixed with something close to fear, as though she were seeing a ghost. Her stride faltered mid-step, disrupting the rhythm of the procession. Her mouth parted slightly, her grip on Cole's arm tightening. She leaned toward him, whispering something urgent I couldn't hear. Cole turned, following her gaze until his eyes found me. That was when I saw it happen. His hands began to shake, not a subtle tremor, but a visible, uncontrollable shaking he tried to disguise by clutching Emma's arm more firmly. The color drained from his face, his carefully composed expression cracking like fine porcelain under stress. A few guests in the front rows noticed, exchanging uncertain glances and quiet murmurs. Cole tried to steady himself, took a breath, and continued walking, but the tremor didn't stop. He hadn't expected me to actually come. He'd invited me assuming I would refuse, giving him the moral high ground. We invited her, but she chose not to attend. Or maybe Emma had insisted, and he'd called, assuming 5 years of silence meant I had vanished completely. But here I was, present, calm, whole, and his carefully built world tilted slightly off its axis. They reached the altar where Janet waited, handsome in that polished, predictable way of young men from good families, kind eyes, and an expensive haircut. He looked at Emma as though she were precious, and that counted for something. Cole released her arm, his hands still trembling, and took his seat in the front row. The officiant began to speak about love, commitment, and partnership, words that should have sounded beautiful, but after what I had lived through, felt strangely hollow. I watched the ceremony unfold, the vows, the rings, the familiar passage from Corinthians about love being patient and kind. But I wasn't watching Emma and Janet, I was watching Cole. He kept glancing toward me, his composure slipping with every look. His face had become a mask of something I could finally name: fear. Cole was afraid. Not of confrontation, not of exposure, not of me. He was afraid of what I represented. The woman he had methodically erased, the wife he'd driven away, who should have stayed broken and invisible, was sitting in the back row of his daughter's wedding, steady and composed, having rebuilt herself into someone he no longer recognized or controlled. My presence alone threatened the entire narrative he had spent 5 years constructing. And as I watched him struggle to hold himself together, I finally understood something profound. For years, I had thought leaving made me weak, that I had failed as a wife and mother because I walked away instead of enduring. But I had been wrong. Real strength isn't found in staying and trying to mend something deliberately broken. It's in leaving and rebuilding yourself so completely that your very existence becomes proof of their failure. Cole had tried to erase me, and I had let him believe he'd succeeded. But then I rebuilt myself so fully that when he finally saw me again, he didn't recognize the woman before him. That was power, quiet, undeniable power. The ceremony ended with the traditional kiss, and the officiant's voice rang out, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Janet Hartman." Applause filled the space as the quartet began something bright and joyful. Emma and Janet walked back down the aisle, radiant and certain, glowing with youth and hope, the kind of confidence you only have when life hasn't yet tested you. As they passed my row, Emma's eyes met mine again. This time, her expression was different. Confusion flickered across Emma's face, something tangled between shame, shock, and maybe anger. Or maybe it was simply the overwhelming emotion of seeing her mother for the first time in 5 years on her wedding day. I nodded once, a simple gesture that held everything words couldn't. I see you. I came. I was here for your wedding. I'm still your mother, even if you've forgotten. Then she was past me, swallowed by the flow of guests offering congratulations and taking photos. As the crowd began drifting toward the reception hall, following signs for cocktails and dinner, I turned quietly and walked in the opposite direction, toward the exit. I had come for the ceremony. That was the promise I'd made to myself. I had no interest in the reception, in pretending to belong among people who believed whatever version of the story Cole had told them, the unstable wife, the unreliable mother, the woman who abandoned her family. I didn't belong in that world of country clubs and curated charm. I'd done what I came to do. I had been present. Visible. Undeniable. That was enough. Pushing through the heavy doors, I stepped into the warm spring sunlight. The air hit my face like a benediction. As I crossed the parking lot toward my car, a strange, unexpected feeling settled over me, lightness. The weight I had carried for 5 long years, the shame, the self-doubt, the quiet wondering if I'd somehow failed, began to lift, like fog dissolving under the sun. I hadn't failed. I had survived something engineered to break me. I had chosen myself when no one else would. There was no shame in that. I was unlocking my car when I heard footsteps hurrying across the pavement. Jade, wait. Cole's voice, breathless, urgent. I turned slowly. He stopped about 10 feet away, his face pale, his carefully composed exterior completely shattered. His tie was crooked, his hands still trembling. You came, he said, as if stating the obvious would somehow make sense of it. You invited me, I replied evenly. We stood there in the sunlight, 2 people who had once promised forever, now strangers separated by 20 years of love, betrayal, and silence. I didn't think you actually would, Cole admitted, his voice unsteady. After everything? I asked quietly. After everything you did to me, you mean? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The neutrality in my tone made him flinch, as though the truth itself hurt more than anger ever could. After you erased me from my own life, I continued, each word deliberate and calm. After you poisoned my relationship with our daughter. After you drained our accounts and built lies about my mental health to my employer and her school. Which everything are we talking about, Cole? His face drained of color. Jade, it wasn't supposed to, it just got out of hand. I almost laughed. No, things didn't get out of hand. You planned it. Every step. The ignoring, the transfers, the emails. That wasn't chaos, it was design. Shock flickered in his expression, followed by something that almost looked like shame, quickly buried under defensiveness. Jade, I lifted one hand, stopping him. I don't need an explanation. And I don't need your apology. He fell silent. I came today because Emma is still my daughter, I said steadily. Because I refuse to be erased from her milestones. But I don't belong in your world anymore. I took out my keys, feeling more grounded than I had in years. And honestly, I added, meeting his eyes, I'm grateful. You showed me exactly how little I meant to you. And it made me realize how much I should mean to myself. I unlocked my car door. Cole's mouth opened, but no words came. I got in, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. The 40-minute drive home carried me through the same stretch of flowering trees I'd passed that morning, but now everything looked different. Lighter. The late afternoon sun painted the highway gold. I rolled down the windows and let the spring air rush in, cleansing and cool. There was no pain, no regret, only quiet observation, like studying artifacts from a past life. I couldn't believe I had once thought that life was acceptable, that the constant shrinking of myself had ever felt like love. I had loved Cole once. I'd believed in our marriage, in the illusion of partnership. Now he was just a stranger whose cruelty had accidentally set me free. If he had only been neglectful or unhappy, I might have stayed, forever trying to fix something built to stay broken. But his deliberate erasure had forced my awakening. In some twisted way, I owed him thanks. As I drove, I thought about Emma, my daughter, now someone's wife, living a life I no longer knew. Part of me hoped she'd eventually start asking questions Cole couldn't answer, that one day she'd want the truth. But I no longer clung to that hope like a lifeline. I'd learned something essential over those years. You can't make people see what they aren't ready to see. All you can do is live your truth so completely that when they're ready, the door will still be open. If that day came, I'd be there. If it never did, I would survive that too. By the time I reached Riverside Meadows, the sun was setting, painting my apartment in shades of red and gold. I parked, climbed the stairs I'd walked countless times, and unlocked the door to my small, peaceful space. The first thing I did was change into comfort. Yoga pants, an old university sweatshirt, clothes I'd never been allowed to wear in the life I left behind. I ordered Thai food from my favorite spot, the one that always added extra spring rolls without asking. Then I settled onto my secondhand couch, turned on the ocean documentary I'd been saving, and let David Attenborough's calm voice fill the room. Halfway through a segment about blue whales, my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. The message was short. "Why did you come today?" No greeting. No signature. But I knew immediately it was from Emma. I stared at those 4 words, reading the accusation woven between them. Not "thank you for coming." Not "I'm sorry we haven't talked." Not even "can we talk?" Just "why did you come today?" As though my presence had been an intrusion, a disruption to the carefully built narrative where I no longer existed. She was angry that I had appeared, angry that I'd reminded everyone, her new husband, his family, the guests, that she had a mother she'd chosen to forget. I typed several responses, deleting each one. "I came because I wanted to see you, to be part of your day, even from a distance." Too needy. "I came because your father invited me, and I wasn't going to let him control whether I showed up at my own daughter's wedding." Too confrontational. "I came because, despite everything, you're still my daughter and I still love you." True, but incomplete. Finally, I settled on what mattered most. "Because you're still my daughter. Even if you've forgotten, I'm still your mother. When you're ready to talk honestly, without your father coaching you, I'll be here." I hesitated, then added, "I love you, Emma. Always have. Nothing you've done or haven't done changes that." I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone completely. Whatever she did with that message was her decision. I had said what needed to be said. The rest was hers to decide. I ate my Thai food slowly, savoring the familiar taste while blue whales glided across my television screen. And somewhere in that quiet evening, watching those ancient creatures who'd survived millennia of change and hardship, I realized something unexpected. I had already gotten my revenge. Not the kind I once imagined, back in those early months at my parents' house, when I dreamed of dramatic confrontations, Cole apologizing, Emma realizing the truth, everyone finally acknowledging the cruelty I had endured. No, the real revenge had been quieter, subtler, far more powerful. It lived in the tremor of Cole's hands when he saw me again, the woman he'd tried to erase, standing calm and whole. It existed in my ability to walk away from that wedding without needing anything from them. No explanations, no closure, no validation. It was in building a life so complete that their approval no longer mattered. The best revenge wasn't destruction or confrontation. It wasn't making them hurt the way they'd hurt me. It was becoming so entirely whole without them that their regret became background noise I no longer needed to hear. 5 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything when I left, my marriage, my daughter, my home, my very identity as wife and mother. But I hadn't lost anything. I had shed it, like a snake shedding skin that no longer fit, skin that had grown too tight, suffocating the life beneath it. And what I gained was infinitely more valuable. I found myself, not the diminished version Cole and Emma had shaped, not the woman who made herself small, quiet, and convenient. Not the generic placeholder Jade who filled roles without substance. The real Jade. The one who had laughed over spilled coffee at a conference, who'd made ridiculous marketing slogans just to make people smile, who once believed she deserved to exist fully, loudly, and unapologetically. She had always been there, buried under 20 years of systematic diminishment, waiting for light. I finished my dinner, cleaned the containers, and followed the familiar evening rhythm that had grounded me for the past 5 years. Tomorrow was Monday staff meeting at the library in the morning, where we'd finalize the summer reading program. Wednesday evening was book club, discussing that Icelandic mystery Kiko had chosen. Thursday after work, yoga with Patricia. Weekend hiking plans with the Phoenix Club, a new trail system 2 hours north. My life wasn't glamorous or dramatic. It wasn't built for social media or validation. But it was mine, genuinely, quietly, completely mine. I'd learned to sleep alone without loneliness, stretching across my bed without wondering when Cole would come to bed, or whether he'd even acknowledge me. I ate what I wanted, without compromise or permission. I made decisions about my time, my money, my friendships, all mine to shape and own. I rediscovered forgotten interests. Marine biology fascinated me. I'd taken an online course about ocean ecosystems. Pottery remained my clumsy but comforting hobby. Independent films replaced the blockbusters I used to pretend to enjoy. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market had become small weekly celebrations of life. I had friends who valued my opinion, colleagues who respected my work, neighbors who greeted me because they genuinely cared how I was doing. Most importantly, I had myself back. Not the wife Cole had molded, not the mother Emma had taken for granted, just Jade. Complex, imperfect, real. As I turned off my bedroom light, a calm I'd never known before settled over me. Not the peace of perfect closure. Not the peace of reconciliation. But the peace of survival, the kind that grows from knowing you walked through fire and rebuilt yourself from the ashes. The peace of walking away from people who treated you like background noise and creating a life where your voice finally mattered. The peace of being erased and then redrawing yourself, stronger, sharper, and more defined than ever before. Cole's hands had trembled today. That was his burden to carry, the weight of realizing what he'd destroyed, what he'd lost, and what he could never reclaim. But that was no longer my burden. 5 years ago, I walked away from a house where I'd been reduced to a ghost. Tonight, I walked toward tomorrow, toward my work, my friends, my quiet apartment, and the life I had built from nothing. And that was power enough. The best revenge was never destruction. It was freedom. And I was finally completely free. If this story of quiet strength and reclamation moved you, tap that like button right now. My favorite moment was when Jade sat silently in the back row as Cole's hands began to tremble, realizing she had survived everything he tried to destroy. What part spoke to you most? Share it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience, justice, and the kind of power that comes from walking away whole.